Scotland is one of the three big historical and geographical regions of Great Britain. Together with England and Ireland, Scotland includes the northern part of Great Britain and the archipelagos of the Outer and Inner Hebrides, the Orkney Islands and the Shetlands. The population is about 6,500,000 inhabitants, and its surface is 80,000 kilometers. In the north, there's the large region of the Highlands, divided by two deep depressions of tectonic origin. One separates the Inner Hebrides from the Outer Hebrides, while the other, the most oriental, separates the reliefs of the Northwest Highlands from the Grampian Islands. South of the Grampian Islands there is the lowland, and the region of the lowlands that stretches between the Firth of Clyde and the Firth of Forth. The highest mountain is Ben Nevis with its 1,343 meters, but almost 70% of the territory is above 300 meters. The first signs of human presence in Scotland dates back to 6,000 years ago. In other words, to the end of the glacial era. During 4,000–3,000 BC, the use of megalithic tombs, especially dolmen and circular graves with corridor dolmen, were widespread all over Scotland, like in most of Europe. At the beginning of 2000 BC, some tribes from Holland, Renania and Sweden arrived, sailing on the North Sea. These newcomers, together with the local population, formed one common late Neolithic culture. Before the arrival of the Romans, two groups of Celtic populations, akin to the continental Gauls, succeeded one another. All these races were already spread all over Scotland when the Roman general, Agricola, in 84 AC, went towards the north looking for a more secure border. Hadrian, who felt threatened since the southern part of Britain, where the Romans had already established some sort of solid government, ordered the building of the famous Hadrian's Wall in the 2nd century. The continuous pressure from the tribes already settled in the north of England inevitably made them leave the defensive line represented by Hadrian's Wall. The Romans organized many roads and fortifications. They introduced glass-blowing and in general influenced Scotland quite a lot before the Roman legions gradually left Britain at the beginning of the 4th century. In the 5th century, the tribes of Picts and Scots invaded and completely destroyed Roman Britain, forcing the Romans to leave the island. The diffusion of Christianity introduced in Scotland by Ninian of Wiltthorne, that began about halfway through the 6th century, and the building of many important monasteries, marked the starting point of civilization of the Picts and the Scots, who, in 843, were united in one kingdom under the reign of Kenneth the Scotsman. In the following centuries, the Kingdom of Scotland was often fighting with the English, although they were highly influenced by them, especially when the Normans invaded Britain. The invasion took place in 1066 and forced many Anglo-Saxons to escape to Scotland. In the following years, Scotland was continuously disturbed by intestine fights and religious conflicts between Catholics and Presbyterians until 1688, under the reign of Anne Stuart and William of Orange, when the Catholics were reorganized by the Scottish Parliament. With the Act of Union in 1707, the kings of Scotland merged with the state of Britain. Since then, 45 deputies and 16 lords sit in the House of Lords in London. Scotland is a region rich with coal mines, and it had always an important role in the development of large metallurgical, chemical and steel mills. The climate in Scotland is temperate, thanks to the influence of the Gulf Stream that laps the northern and western coast. The complete integration of Scotland and Britain in the United Kingdom dates back to 1707, but hasn't mitigated the conscience of a national Scottish individuality yet. In the economy of the United Kingdom, Scotland can be considered a suburban region economically depressed. The fertile lands are rare, the woods are thin and quite poor, and consist essentially of conifers, and they took great advantage of the recent reforestations. The rains are abundant, so the region is rich with rivers and lakes. Almost all the rivers flow into the sea with wide and narrow inlets of glacial origin, locally called firths, that are just fjords, in other words, river valleys, enlarged and sub-excavated by the glaciers of the Quaternary period and subsequently invaded by seawater. The largest fjords are the Solway, Clyde, Moray, Fay and Forth. There are numerous lakes that are mostly narrow and stretched and are called lochs. The most important are Loch Ness, Loch Morar, Loch Maree, Loch Rannoch and Loch Katrine, and also Loch Lomond. Apart from the lowland, where there is one of the largest densities of population of Europe, the rest of the region is scarcely populated. The economical resources are sheep farming, the production of beer and whiskey, fishing and the textile industry. The typical fish of Scotland is the salmon, that is exported throughout Europe. The most important harbour is Glasgow, while the most famous town historically and artistically is Edinburgh, with its 500,000 inhabitants, making it the second largest city after Glasgow, with a population of 2 million inhabitants. Edinburgh is the historical and administrative capital, the political and financial centre of the country, that for the characteristics of its territory, functions can be compared to the capital of a state more than the country town of a region. Scotland has its central bank in Edinburgh, which is authorised to print paper money. Its museum is rich with artworks, from the Flemish painters to the French impressionists, Degas, Gauguin, to the Spanish painters El Greco and Italian artists. On a hill called Castle Rock, where the Romans built a fortress around 617, the King of Northumberland built a castle around which the actual town started developing. Among the most important monuments of this town, we remember Holyrood Palace and Church, dated back to the 12th century. With a Scottish Gothic style, this palace guested Mary Stuart. We must also remember the monument to the poet and writer Walter Scott, who, in his historical novels, brought to life once more the great myths of the past. Some other towns of great interest are Aberdeen, Dundee and Inverness. Inverness is an old fortified town, very important in the Middle Ages, located at the estuary of the Ness, affluent of Loch Ness, in the Moray Firth, and now an active commercial centre with various industries. Starting from the 60s, the region has been receiving about 40% of government allocations for industrial development. This caused a continuous lack of population in the highlands and other areas, from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution to the present time. They moved to the industrialized areas that soon became densely populated, one of the most overcrowded of Europe. This sudden industrialization brought the exclusion of the rural economy and the polycultural small holdings that were sustaining it. That is why the structure of the rich landowner prevailed in the highlands, but with a poor value for the land. The basin of central Scotland, the lowlands, offers the visitor a completely different view compared with the highlands. The lowlands have 3/4 of the regional population and 90% of the industrial potential. Most of this industrial apparatus is concentrated in the large area around Glasgow, where the American industries have also placed their production units in order to export their goods in the countries of the ECC and EFTA.